One of the really good questions that I frequently get on this is that, cell phone use went way up in the last decade, but crashes actually went down a little bit. And if it's so dangerous to use a cell phone while driving, if you're 4 times more likely to crash, which is what the research says, why haven't crashes just spiked? How could they possibly go down? And you know what? On the surface, that's a great question. But if you think about it a little bit, the premise of the question implies that nothing has been done to reduce crashes. And a tremendous amount of things have been done to reduce crashes, especially in the last 10 years. If you look at vehicle technology, we've got anti-lock brakes and airbags and seat belts, and those two don't reduce crashes, but they reduce fatalities, and fatalities have gone down a little bit too. And we've got stability control, and we've got lane departure warnings, and we've got blind spot warnings, and on and on and on. Our roadways have become a lot safer. We've got center lane reflectors. We've got lane departure rumble strips. All of that stuff has become more prolific in the last 10 years. We're doing things to help drivers behave better. We've got high visibility enforcement for seatbelt use and driving under the influence. We enforce driving under the influence more than we ever have. So all of that has come about in the last 10 to 15 years. But in that time, our crashes and our fatalities per mile driven have stopped declining at the rate they were prior to that. They've been declining dramatically since the 1950s, and in the last 10 years it's kind of leveled out a little bit. Maybe that's because we've introduced cell phones. They have become more prolific. In the year 2000, about 2% of all drivers were on a cell phone, and now we think it's closer to about 10%. So it's gone up substantially, and during that exact same time we saw that curve flatten out as far as crashes being reduced and fatalities being reduced. We hear a lot about multitasking. It's a good thing to be a good multitasker, and we're all challenged to do that, especially today with the kind of mobile communications technology we have available to us. What researchers are finding out is that the human brain really does not multitask. It's sequentially tasked. It goes back and forth from one difficult task to another. Now, this doesn't apply to things like walking and chewing gum, but 2 cognitively demanding tasks the human brain cannot do at the same time. It goes back and forth. I like to call it toggle tasking, and some people are better at that than others, but at any given moment the brain has to be focused on only one of those tasks. We now know, we never knew this before, we didn't have any reason to know it, but we now know that the act of a telephone conversation, a conversation with somebody who is not in your environment, is more cognitively demanding than we ever dreamed. And we've always known that driving a vehicle is cognitively demanding. So the brain's got to choose one, can't do both. And if an event happens while driving a vehicle and you don't respond to it as quickly or as well as you should, the consequences are huge. It can result in death, loss, serious injury. It's a very, very serious thing. A good example, I ask people, I say, can you watch your favorite television show or movie, be engaged in it, follow it closely, while you talk to somebody on the phone? People say, no, I got to choose one or the other, and that's the exact point. If that's the case, how can we expect to drive a 5,000-pound vehicle through a dynamic, always changing environment where the smallest mistake could result in serious injury? As I talk about distracted driving, one of the most common questions that comes up is if cognitive distraction is such a big deal, and if talking to somebody on the phone is so dangerous, how's it any different than talking to a passenger? And that's a great question. It was one of the first things I thought of when I first started looking into this. But there actually are some significant differences. And one of them is, we talked about the cognitive demand of a telephone conversation. What we're finding out is it's harder. It requires more brain resources, more cognitive resources on my part to have the exact same conversation with somebody who's not in front of me, who I'm not looking at. I can't see their response. I can't see if they're nodding or shaking their head. I can't see if they're about to say something to me. It's harder to do that with somebody on the phone who's not in my presence than it is somebody who is in my presence. So it just takes, there's more of a cognitive load. That's the one issue. The other issue is, and this is also key, is that the passenger is in the same driving environment with us. And like it or not, many times they're helping us drive. I frequently ask people, when was the last time you sat in the front passenger seat of a vehicle and didn't pay attention to the drive? We all pay attention. We look. We know it's a dangerous environment. If a light suddenly turns yellow and the driver has to make a quick decision on whether it's safe to go or they should stop, the conversation stops. We might even have a spouse or somebody help us make that decision. So there's a huge difference between the passengers. Some studies have actually shown that one front seat passenger for an adult driver, not for a novice or teen driver, but for an adult driver, actually adds a protective effect. There's actually fewer crashes with one front seat passenger. So it's a great question, but when you understand the explanation, it's pretty obvious why that cell phone is so much more dangerous than having a passenger with you.
We are all pedestrians at some point in the day, whether walking to work, a friend's house, or to the bus stop. Even walking to your parked car, you are a pedestrian. But pedestrians are a vulnerable user of the transportation system, especially youth and seniors. It's everyone's responsibility to keep pedestrians safe. As our community grows and more people share the street, we need to show extra care in observing traffic laws. Anytime you are behind the wheel, be aware of pedestrians. When walking, be aware of cars anytime you step off the curb. Here's a quick overview of traffic laws that affect pedestrians. You can cross the street at the intersection of any two streets, whether a crosswalk is marked or not. Vehicles are legally required to yield to you at intersections, but be cautious. At traffic signals, obey the law and cross with the walk signal. Here's a quick overview of traffic signals for pedestrians. When the signal shows a steady walk or the person walking symbol, it's okay to cross, but watch for turning vehicles. The flashing red "Don't walk" or hand symbol tells the pedestrian they should not step off the sidewalk and begin crossing. If you are already in the crosswalk when the signal starts to flash, finish crossing. Once the signal starts to flash, a pedestrian that has already begun to cross will have enough time to complete the crossing. If the signal shows the steady "Don't walk" or hand symbol, don't start crossing. Wait for the next walk signal. Sometimes a pedestrian will arrive at a signal and the light is green for cars, but the "Don't walk" signal is showing. This is because there is not enough time left in the signal cycle to allow you to cross. In this case, the pedestrian must wait for the next cycle for the walk signal. As motorists and pedestrians, even when we all obey the law, conflicts can occur. The most common conflict is the right turn on red. As a motorist, never make a right turn on red without first coming to a complete stop. Look for and yield to pedestrians who are crossing with the signal. As a pedestrian, be aware of this conflict and make eye contact with drivers before you cross in front of them. When making left turns, drivers are often focused on oncoming traffic, especially while making left turns across multiple lanes. As a rule, always scan for pedestrians at intersections before making a turn. Use caution when passing another vehicle that is stopped at an intersection. They may be stopped for a pedestrian you cannot see. As a pedestrian, be aware of this situation. When crossing or entering a street, be sure to look for pedestrians on the sidewalk or shoulder to your right and left, especially at one-way streets. You may be focused on the traffic coming from one direction, but remember to look for pedestrians walking towards you from the other direction. When there is no sidewalk present, Walking on the edge of the road or in a bike lane is appropriate as long as you are facing traffic. When walking during the day, wear light or bright clothing. At night, wear reflective material and carry a light. When walking or driving, be predictable. Be respectful. Make eye contact. Don't be in a hurry. Know the law and obey it.
First of all, as a motorist, you must keep in mind that bicycle and motorcycle riders have the same rights and responsibilities as vehicle drivers while on public roads. Respect their right-of-way because they are entitled to share the road with you. Look carefully for cyclists before making turns, merging into traffic, changing lanes, or when opening doors next to moving traffic. Look over your shoulder and use mirrors before changing lanes. Motorcycles can come into your lane within seconds, which is why looking over your shoulder is essential each time you change lanes. Road hazards such as potholes, gravel, wet surfaces, pavement seams, and railroad crossings pose hazards to cyclists. They may cause them to vary their speed, change direction, or fall suddenly. Drive attentively and be aware of how these conditions affect cyclists. Statistics show that a high percentage of injury collisions are caused by failing to yield the right-of-way to cyclists. Remember, courtesy and common sense promote traffic safety for all. The roads are crowded enough, so the best way to prevent a collision is to distance yourself from other vehicles and cyclists. This gives you more time to react and space to maneuver. Allow a cyclist a full lane width. Allow a 4-second following distance for motorcyclists. You will need this space to avoid collision should the rider fall. Never drive your vehicle in the bicycle lanes. The only exception is when making a right turn. You must be within 200 feet of the corner or a driveway entrance before you can merge into the bicycle lane. Also, do not speed up to overtake a bicycle just before making a right turn. Merge into the turning lane behind the bicyclist, then make the turn. As a motorist, remember to keep in mind that bicycle and motorcycle riders have the same rights and responsibilities as vehicle drivers while on public roads. They are entitled to share the road with you, so please respect their right-of-way. Make the roads a safer place for everyone.